The chilly air of Salt Lake City whispered promises of peace and change as my wife and I embarked on what felt like a much-needed escape. Married for over a decade at that point, we had settled into a life of comfort, steady, predictable, and at times, monotonous. The trip was supposed to shake things up, a brief retreat from the grind. She had a work conference, and I tagged along to explore the city during the day and spend the evenings with her. Those first few days felt rejuvenating. We laughed over dinners, strolled through the city streets, and rediscovered the joy of each other's company. But by Thursday, my time was up. Work obligations pulled me back home, while she stayed behind for the last 2 days of her conference. It was bittersweet to leave her, but I trusted her completely. I hugged her tightly at the hotel lobby, kissed her goodbye, and told her I'd call later. The next day, Friday, I kept my word. I called her in the morning, excited to hear about her plans. The phone rang, then went to voicemail. No big deal, I thought. She must be busy with her speech or caught up in the day's events. I left her a light-hearted message and waited. But by mid-morning, when she still hadn't called back, unease started to creep in. I called again, straight to voicemail. The hours dragged on, and as the afternoon turned into evening, my worry morphed into frustration. My texts went unanswered, my calls ignored. Every attempt to reach her was met with the same hollow response. What could possibly be so urgent that she couldn't even spare a moment to call me back? Was she okay? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Maybe she lost her phone, I reasoned. Or maybe she was dealing with an emergency at work. I even entertained the idea that she'd fallen ill. But deep down, a darker thought began to form, one I quickly pushed away. When Saturday finally came, I drove to the airport to pick her up. I told myself everything was fine, that I'd been overthinking. But the moment I saw her, something felt off. Her smile was there, but it didn't reach her eyes. She seemed distracted, almost distant. When I asked about her day on Friday, she sighed and told me she'd had a rough time with her speech. She claimed she'd spent the entire day rewriting it, too stressed to even check her phone. It sounded plausible, but her tone lacked conviction. There was no heartfelt apology for worrying me, no reassurance. It felt rehearsed, as if she'd practiced the story in her head before seeing me. I wanted to press her, to ask why she hadn't even sent a quick text. But I didn't. I swallowed my doubts, convinced myself I was being paranoid. We were married, after all. Marriage is built on trust, or so I thought. But the truth is, the seeds of doubt were planted long before we said, I do. I just didn't want to see them. I remember one night, early in our relationship, when I received a call that shook me to my core. It was late, well past midnight, and I was half asleep when the phone rang. On the other end was a woman, her voice trembling, laced with alcohol and tears. Is this her boyfriend? She asked, slurring her words. Yes, I replied cautiously, my heart already sinking. She's sleeping with my husband, the woman blurted out, her voice cracking under the weight of her grief. You should know. She's been making herself available. I froze, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Could it be true? Was the woman just bitter, lashing out in anger? When my girlfriend came home later that night, I confronted her. Her reaction was calm. Too calm. She dismissed the caller as a jealous wife looking to cause trouble. She didn't deny knowing the man, but she insisted there was nothing between them. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. So I did. I pushed the incident aside, told myself it didn't matter. We were happy, weren't we? Why dig up something that might ruin what we had? But now, years later, I can't help but wonder, was that the first crack in the foundation of our relationship? Or had I simply turned a blind eye to the truth? Life went on, and we built a marriage that seemed strong from the outside. Over the years, we faced our share of challenges, but we always came out stronger, or so I thought. It wasn't until a casual dinner party years later that the past came rushing back. We were sitting with friends, reminiscing about old times, when someone mentioned her younger years. She used to be wild back then, one friend said with a laugh. She even joked about having affairs. but she'd say it didn't count because she wasn't married yet. The room erupted in laughter, but I sat frozen. My chest tightened, my mind spinning. I smiled weakly, pretending to laugh along, but inside I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. That night, as we drove home, her friend's words echoed in my head, memories of the drunken caller, her odd comments about making herself available, and of course that silent Friday in Salt Lake City all came flooding back. Could it be true? Had she carried that same mindset into our marriage? I began to analyze everything she did, every word she said. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Small inconsistencies, moments that didn't quite add up. Our life together suddenly felt fragile, like a house of cards ready to collapse. The weight of doubt grew heavier with each passing day. Should I confront her? Ask her outright about Salt Lake City, about the drunken caller, about the stories from her past? Or should I let it go? One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, the question burned in my mind. I studied her face, searching for answers in her expression. She looked serene, content. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft, filled with concern. I hesitated, my heart pounding. This was my moment. I could ask her, finally uncover the truth. But as I looked at her, I felt a wave of fear. What if her answer shattered everything we'd built? What if the truth was more than I could handle? Instead, I forced a smile and said, "I was just thinking about how lucky I am to have you." Her smile was warm, her hand finding mine. She leaned into me, and for a moment, everything felt normal. But the questions remained, lingering like a shadow over our life together. Some truths, I decided, are better left unspoken. Maybe I was protecting our marriage, or maybe I was just protecting myself. Either way, I knew I'd carry the weight of my doubts for the rest of my life. Even now, as I sit here telling this story, I wonder, did I make the right choice, or did I let fear dictate my life? The answers may never come, but one thing is certain. The past, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of shaping the present. And sometimes, the heaviest burdens are the ones we carry in silence.